you ever feel a chill crawl up your spine when you hear a twig snap in the dead of night? A feeling that you are not alone even in the most secluded of places. That's the fear that gripped Texarkana in 1946. A fear born from the moonlight. A terror that arrived with the dusk and had a name whispered in hushed, terrified tones. The Phantom Killer. It was a time when the war was over and hope was on the horizon. But for this small border town, a new kind of war was just beginning. A war against a shadow that hunted the young and in love. The spring of 1946 should have been a season of rebirth for Texarkana, a town straddling the border of Texas and Arkansas, pulsating with post-war optimism. Young men were returning home, families were reuniting, and the future seemed as bright and promising as a Texas sunrise. The quiet, tree-lined lovers' lanes on the outskirts of town were once again filled with the soft laughter and whispered promises of couples dreaming of that future. They were places of innocence, escapes from the watchful eyes of parents, where the only light came from the moon and the dashboard radio. But that idyllic peace was about to be shattered. An unseen presence began to stalk these secluded spots. A predator who moved with the silence of the night. It started as a feeling, a prickling on the back of the neck, the sense of being watched from the dense, dark woods that bordered these lanes. Soon, the feeling would give way to a horrifying reality, and the lovers' lanes of Texarkana would be transformed from havens of romance into hunting grounds, their names forever stained with blood and fear. The town was unknowingly on the brink of a nightmare. On the cold night of February 22nd, Jimmy Hollies and Mary Jean Larry were parked on one such secluded road, their car a small bubble of warmth against the chill. Suddenly, a blinding flashlight beam sliced through their window, followed by the appearance of a terrifying figure. A crude white mask, like a pillowcase with eye holes cut out, obscured the man's face, making him a faceless embodiment of terror. He carried a pistol, and his voice was cold and devoid of emotion as he ordered them out of the vehicle, his words cutting through the night's stillness. The attacker's command was simple and chilling. "I don't want to kill you, fellow, so do what I say." He forced Jimmy Hollies to remove his pants, a strange and humiliating prelude to the violence that would follow. Then, with brutal force, the masked man pistol-whipped Hollies, the sickening thud of the blows echoing in the silent woods. Hollies collapsed, his skull fractured, unconscious on the cold ground. The Phantom then turned his attention to Mary Jean, his intentions clear and monstrous. He ordered Mary Jean to run, a cruel game of cat and mouse in the terrifying darkness. As she scrambled away, her heart pounding with sheer panic, he chased her down. The Phantom didn't just want to inflict pain. He wanted to savor their fear. He sexually assaulted her with the cold, hard steel of his pistol before inexplicably letting her go. Both Jimmy and Mary Jean miraculously survived the savage attack. But they were left with more than just physical scars. They were the first to see the phantom, the living heralds of the horror to come. The town was shaken by the brutal assault, but many authorities initially dismissed it as an isolated, albeit vicious, incident. Some even speculated that the young couple knew their attacker and were protecting him, a theory that left Holly's and Larry feeling isolated in their trauma. They had seen the monster, described his 6-foot frame and his haunting white mask, but their warnings were not taken with the seriousness they deserved. The town of Texarkana continued its peaceful existence, unaware that the phantom was just getting started. Exactly 1 month later, the phantom's shadow fell again, this time with lethal finality. On March 24th, Richard Griffin and his girlfriend, Polly Ann Moore, were found dead in Griffin's parked car on a different lover's lane. A passing motorist made the gruesome discovery. Both had been shot in the back of the head with a .32 caliber pistol. Execution style, the cold, methodical nature of the killings sent a wave of genuine fear through the community. This was no random act of violence. This was the work of a calculating hunter. The crime scene told a chilling story. Bloodstains on the ground outside the vehicle indicated that Richard and Polly Ann had been murdered outside the car and then carefully placed back inside. Richard's pockets were turned inside out, suggesting a robbery, but the sheer brutality of the act pointed to something far more sinister than a simple mugging. The killer had taken their lives and then posed their bodies, a horrifying signature that marked the beginning of his reign of terror. The moonlight that had once seemed romantic now felt menacing. Panic began to set in. The term Moonlight Murders was coined by the press, a name that captured the terrifying nature of the crimes. The lovers' lanes, once symbols of youthful freedom, became places of dread. Parents warned their children to stay home after dark. The town's sense of security was shattered. Who was this masked man who stalked the night? He seemed to strike at will and then vanish without a trace, leaving only death and questions in his wake. Texarkana was now a town looking over its shoulder. Just 3 weeks later, as the town held its breath, the phantom struck again. On the night of April 14th, 2 more young lives were brutally extinguished. Teenagers Paul Martin and Betty Jo Booker had been at a VFW club where Betty Jo, a talented musician, had been performing with her band. After the show, Paul picked her up and they drove off into the night, unaware they were driving into the phantom's lethal embrace. Their deaths would escalate the growing fear into citywide hysteria. Paul Martin's body was found the next morning by the side of a road, shot 4 times. Betty Jo Booker's body was discovered nearly 2 miles away, hidden behind a tree. She had been shot twice, once in the chest and once in the face. The sheer savagery of the attack on these 2 popular teenagers stunned the community. The killer was becoming bolder, more ferocious. It was after these murders that the local newspaper, the Texarkana Gazette, first used the name that would become legend: the Phantom Killer. The investigation was now a massive undertaking, drawing in law enforcement from both Texas and Arkansas. But the Phantom was clever, leaving behind almost no clues. An overnight rain after the Martin Booker murders had washed away any potential footprints or tire tracks. He was like a ghost, a wraith who materialized out of the darkness to kill, and then disappeared back into it. The lack of evidence was maddening for the police and terrifying for the public. He was a killer without a face, without a motive, and without a pattern beyond his preference for weekends and couples. The fear in Texarkana became a tangible entity, a poison that seeped into every home. As dusk fell, a self-imposed curfew descended upon the city. Businesses closed early, streets emptied, and residents locked and bolted their doors. Many, for the first time in their lives, the sale of guns, ammunition, locks, and window shades skyrocketed as citizens armed themselves against the unseen terror. The town that had just celebrated the end of a world war was now under siege from a single, unknown enemy. The pressure to catch the killer was immense. Into this cauldron of fear stepped the legendary Texas Ranger, Captain Manuel T. Lone Wolf Gonzaullas, a charismatic and tough-as-nails lawman. Gonzaullas had a reputation for getting his man. His arrival was met with a sense of hope. If anyone could stop the Phantom, it was Lone Wolf. He set up a command post and brought with him the full force and expertise of the Texas Rangers. Vowing to hunt down the man who was terrorizing Texarkana, Gonzaullas and his team worked tirelessly, chasing down every lead, no matter how small. They investigated hundreds of suspects, but each trail went cold. The Phantom's randomness was his greatest asset. There was no connection between the victims, no clear motive to follow. The only link was the killer's brutality and his hunting grounds on the dark, lonely roads. Gonzaullas, facing a frustrating lack of clues, publicly urged citizens to be cautious and to arm themselves for protection, a statement that only heightened the pervasive atmosphere of dread. Then, on the night of May 3rd, the Phantom changed his pattern, proving that no one was safe. He moved away from the lovers' lanes and brought his terror directly into the home of a married couple, Virgil and Katie Starks, at their isolated farmhouse northeast of the city. This attack was different. It wasn't about young lovers in a parked car. It was a direct assault on the sanctity of the home, the one place people thought they could hide from the monster in the dark. Virgil Starks was sitting in his living room chair, reading the newspaper, when two shots suddenly blasted through the closed window. The bullets struck him in the back of the head, killing him instantly. His wife, Katie, hearing the shattering glass and the gunshots, rushed into the room to find her husband dead. As she scrambled to the phone to call for help, the phantom fired again from the same window. Katie Starks was shot twice in the face, blinded by her own blood, but fueled by an incredible will to survive. She heard the killer at the back of the house, trying to break in. Despite her horrific injuries, she managed to escape out the front door and run to a neighbor's house for help. Katie survived, a testament to her courage, but she was never able to provide a clear description of the attacker. The phantom had once again struck from the shadows and remained unseen. The Starks' attack marked a terrifying escalation. The weapon used was a .22 caliber firearm, different from the .32 used in the previous murders, which initially caused some confusion for investigators. However, the sheer audacity and violence of the crime convinced them it was the work of the phantom. He had graduated from ambushing couples in cars to a full-fledged home invasion, a far more intimate and frightening form of violation. The people of Texarkana realized that locks and bolts might not be enough to keep the evil out. A massive manhunt ensued, the largest in the region's history. Police and armed citizens patrolled the roads, set up roadblocks, and even used decoys in lovers' lanes, hoping to lure the killer into a trap. But the phantom was elusive. He seemed to have an almost supernatural ability to sense the traps and avoid them. The intense pressure and the constant dead ends wore on the investigators, including the unflappable lone wolf Gonzaullas. The most promising suspect to emerge was a local career criminal named Yowl Swinney. Swinney had a long record of car theft, and investigators noticed a pattern. A car was often reported stolen around the time of each murder. The biggest break came when Swinney's wife, Peggy, was arrested. Under questioning, she confessed in great detail that her husband was the phantom killer. It seemed the nightmare was finally over. Peggy's confession provided details that had not been released to the public, lending it a strong air of credibility. However, her story changed slightly across several interviews, and she was considered an unreliable witness. The crucial blow to the prosecution's case came when she refused to testify against her husband in court, as she could not be legally compelled to do so. Without her testimony, the circumstantial evidence against Swinney was not enough to secure a murder conviction. Yowl Swinney was never charged with the Moonlight Murders. Instead, he was sentenced to life in prison as a habitual offender for car theft. Many of the lead investigators, including Ranger Gonzaullas, remained convinced that Swinney was the phantom, but they could never definitively prove it. Swinney maintained his innocence until his death in 1994, taking his secrets, if he had any, to the grave. The question of his guilt remains one of the most debated aspects of the case. And then, as suddenly as it began, the terror stopped. After the attack on the Starks' farmhouse, the phantom killer simply vanished, There were no more attacks, no more bodies found in the moonlight. He disappeared as if he were a ghost, leaving a town of over 400 suspects, a handful of cryptic clues, and a community forever scarred by 10 weeks of unrelenting fear. The silence he left behind was almost as unnerving as the violence had been. The spring of terror gave way to a summer of uneasy peace. The people of Texarkana slowly began to reclaim their lives, but the town was irrevocably changed. A shadow of paranoia lingered. People were more suspicious of strangers, more diligent about locking their doors. The innocence of the post-war era had been stolen, replaced by the grim knowledge that a monster could walk among them. Hidden in plain sight, the legend of the Phantom Killer grew over the years, becoming a dark and integral part of Texarkana's identity. His story was told and retold, evolving into a chilling local folktale. A cautionary tale whispered to teenagers about the dangers that lurk in the dark, on lonely roads. The unsolved nature of the crimes ensured that the phantom would never truly die. He would live on in the town's collective memory, a boogeyman for generations to come. The case officially remains open, a cold file in the archives of both Texas and Arkansas law enforcement. It stands as one of the most infamous unsolved serial murder cases in American history. The theories are endless. Was it Yowell Swinney? Was it a different local resident? Or was it a transient killer who simply passed through Texarkana, leaving a trail of blood before moving on to other, unknown hunting grounds? We will likely never know for sure. For the survivors, like Mary Jean Larry and Katie Starks, the ordeal was a life sentence of traumatic memories. They carried the physical and emotional scars of their encounters with the phantom for the rest of their days. Their survival was a miracle, but it was also a constant reminder of the night they came face to face with a faceless evil, and the loved ones who were not so fortunate. Their stories serve as the most powerful testimony to the phantom's brutal legacy. In the years that followed, strange postscripts were added to the phantom's tale. In the late 1990s, an anonymous woman contacted surviving family members of the victims to apologize for what her father had done, adding another layer of mystery. However, the primary suspect, Yowell Swinney, never had a daughter, making this confession another frustrating dead end in a case full of them. The phantom's identity remained shrouded in darkness. The story of the Phantom Killer is more than just a tale of unsolved murders. It's a chilling exploration of how fear can hold a community hostage. It's a reminder that evil can erupt in the most ordinary of places, transforming idyllic scenes into landscapes of horror. The moon still shines down on the quiet roads of Texarkana, but for those who know the story, it will never look quite the same. It will forever be a reminder of the spring of 1946, when the moonlight brought not romance, but a killer. And so, the phantom remains at large, a ghost haunting the border of two states, his true face never known. His crimes created a chilling archetype, the masked slasher who preys on lovers' lanes, a trope that has echoed through horror movies and urban legends ever since. The Town That Dreaded Sundown was not just a film title. It was the reality for the people of Texarkana, a reality born from a faceless killer who turned their peaceful nights into a waking nightmare. Perhaps the most unsettling part of this story is its lack of resolution. Monsters are supposed to be caught, their masks torn off to reveal the ordinary, pathetic human beneath. But the phantom killer was never unmasked. He remains a pure, terrifying enigma. Was he just a man, or was he something more? A phantom born of the collective fear and darkness of the time. The question hangs in the humid Texas air, a final, chilling whisper from a ghost who has never left.